Nam Jesi Zinderavan Bhavan Jumanegayam Nam Jesi Zinderavan Nam Jesi Amshe Vandavani Aso Jakutan Sitaman Shubham Varigayam Nam Jesi Vandavani Yadavam Varesman Mumbai Dayam Shangya Vandamani Dayam Nam Seravani Kasumeti Nidhi Nasani Nidhi Gandhi Seravani Nidhi Moti Nidhi Anu Shaya Ramandamani Hanma Ashokaro Varegaya Bhanam Sri Chindravan Jumanegaya Bhanam Esau Kalmaya Sneman Yukataya Jaharam Dahum Sirojo Dhamana Nikomana Kunaya Kyavani Jani Yadam Iman Vishwadan Devsam Yasena Mahaparam Ruvani Vedam Madhyam Gandhigam Varataram Gavani Sankavashashon Mayu Kadaya Jagaram Varadam Vasari Sumam Parvashashon Tamisvaradam Sarvabhumbai Sarvabhumbai Sarvabhumai Kangadaya Shumam Varejam Kadam Usai Korevantyam Vikshumene Sarvam Shashok Kadita Nam Jesi Sinderavan Bhavan Juman Aigaya Bam Nam Jesi Sinderavan Bhavan Juman Desam Bhavaya Srevan Juman Desam Iragaro Juman Shriyali Deshvarostavan Niyatang humeyo jyotang parayamne.
Yapahuveyo yosotam parame marute.
Ataratum satinajam karasambhavipamatam. Sarvashena shimurodem vedadem pradem shanam shanam. Vajan Bechun Prabhusan Bechun Kistari, Chava Bechun Vanamina Bechun Kurshi, Vaskete Bechun Garbhasram, Devasi Bechun Devan Kamsam, Bhagan Bechun Asuna Mazami Vasmedam Bechun Ude Navadam, Vasamba Bechun Gavisam, Adam Bechun Baha, Ubay Bechun Gu, Avasri Bechun Zara Bechun Diran, Keda Bechun Alamazda Parai Padamaki, Ina Pino Ikane Sumaya Dumba, Dumba Okushidama, Oata Sumaya Umarumus Oyasmin Dulo Vajan Doshe. Amanjumanram, Evanjumanram, Ekilanjumanram, Akransa Atasveram Patsaram. Bangvazandandam Samsindagani Madrajam, Ajamegam Puspastam Pudapakiyase, O Paksakam Parivate Kumbhishiniyam, Narasukam Sandasaya Kirandaranamivan, Dusman Jana Omudapnujam, O Garum Kakal Zamyam Yatafirame, Dhamman Kevaina Sudhara Sinena Sinena, Veda Vandandar Vakamiram Vishnavam, Bahestaram Shankaroshmani Vikaniram, Prabhadam Vajnevavaziyam, Prabhakshurantunayo Bhunde Samam, Kokiti Ekam Kavino Ekam Sarvadana Saive Avadiyam, Ravam Karotmanimam, Ravam Karotmanimam, Ravam Karotmanimam. Asobedeti atasvanyam yanam vinami, umartana uttaram varasnam yadachanyanacham vedyam nanacham, vavedyam nanacham mayegi jarinam nenisaro yakranam gurnam vehi.
Yes.
They have 5 minutes, so I can some explanation. Otherwise, it's fine.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Here we got Cradle.
Aji, jara आओ ना.
Can we start the?
Let me thank each and every one of you who has participated in today's Gahambar Jashan ceremony. Gahambar are the seasonal festivals occur 6 times a year. Each Gahambar has duration of 5 days. They are joyous occasions at which rich and poor meet together and promoted fellowship, forgiveness, and charity to the poor. In the Gahambar prayers, it is stated that each Zoroastrian should participate in the Gahambar by either donating in kind or by donating cash to support. If a person cannot afford to donate in cash or kind, then at least he is to be present at the Gahambar prayer to participate in the praise and thanksgiving to Mazda for his creations. In the Gahambar ceremony, there are 4 verbs we use: Yazat, Sazat, Kural, and Dehan. means pray, perform, eat, and give. Thank you all for your time. May our Mazda bless you all. Atal Yatha Prinami. May it be so as I wish for. Thank you again once more. Have a good day.
Thank you to Jimmy Rauji and Pacey Vajifta for the wonderful prayers. Thank you.
So shall we start now?
Yes, go ahead, Mani.
Okay. Hello all. First, I would like to welcome you all and thank you all for coming today. Let me thank first our priest for the prayers, Jimmy Rauji and Pacey Vajifdar, and our ZAC group, especially Afshan and Chiraz, for helping us to facilitating the prayers on Zoom. Before I introduce our prominent guest speaker, let me just take a few minutes to say a few words about this event. WZCC Chicago chapter is a part of World Zarathustra Chamber of Commerce, a non-profit organization at a global level, the economic engine for the well-being and prosperity of the community. We certainly encourage and like to invite you all to become a WZCC Chicago chapter member, or and if you'd like to know more about it, you can call me or any of our committee members, or send us an email at wzcc.chicago@gmail.com. Email address is also put in our chat section, so you can note that down. We at WZCC Chicago chapter is a tradition start the first event of the year with Hamas-path-maedem Gahambar. This year, to keep the tradition going as well as a new project undertaken by a joint venture of Fazana and WZCC it's called ZEDF, Zarathustra Entrepreneurship Development Foundation. And I'm happy to bring these two entities together. I'd like to invite Mr. Rohinton Ravetna, our founding father, to say a few words about ZEDF. Rohinton? Can you put a spotlight on Rohinton, please?
Thanks, Mani, for organizing this event and for heading our Chicago chapter so very well. Thank you. ZF, the Zarathustra Entrepreneurship Development Foundation, has been one of the 14 infrastructure needs for North America, for our community, of course. It is a model, not-for-profit, tax-exempt initiative on two counts. One, it is a joint effort of Fazana, a religious organization, and that of WZCC, a business organization, anchored in the notion that a community prospers if its businesses and professions prosper. Thanks are due to Erv Dr, the global chair of WZCC, Homi Gandhi, the former president of Fazana, and Arzan Wadia, the president of Fazana, for spearheading ZF. That's short for ZEDF, ZF, we call it. Count number two, why ZF is a model organization, is because it is a philanthropic organization par excellence. ZF receives your donation with a tax-exempt receipt which are loaned interest-free to individuals to create and or improve their enterprise. And when the recipient of the loan returns the loan, it benefits another and another. Your dollars keep rolling over and over again, benefiting many individuals and in turn benefits our community. So please give freely. The goal is to raise $1 million this year. The link to donate was on the announcement that you received, and it is zf.org/contribute. Thanks, Mani.
Thank you, Rohinton, for a wonderful brief introduction of ZEDF. We have put the link in our flyer, as Rohinton mentioned. Also, it is provided in chat section. So if anyone wants to know more about it or to donate, you can use that link. Thank you. Now, let me do a long-awaited introduction of our prominent guest speaker, Dr. Mazda Turel. Dr. Turel completed his degree in medicine, MBBS, from Grant Medical College and Sir J.J. Groups of Hospitals in Mumbai, and went on to pursue a MCH degree in neurosurgery from the prestigious Christian Medical College in Vellore, India. He was awarded the Jacob Chandy Gold Medal at his graduation, a distinction that has only been conferred previously to 4 other recipients since its institution 35 years ago. After completing his residency, he visited several departments of neurosurgery across the world and earned a diploma in minimally invasive neurosurgery from Beijing, China. He then went on to complete a fellowship in skull-base surgery in neuro-oncology at the Toronto Western Hospital, and another fellowship in minimally invasive and complex spine surgery at the Rush University in Chicago. Dr. Turel is a general practice neurosurgeon who specializes in the treatment of diseases of the brain and spine and advocates an approach to neurosurgery that is both balanced and aggressive. His practice style is collaborative, and he strongly believes that incorporation of patients, their families, and the medical staff as members of his team offers patients the best possible outcome and satisfaction. In addition, he is a professional columnist for the Jami Jamshed newspaper, as well as Sunday Midday, in which he writes a fortnightly column on neurosurgical anecdotes, enlightening the common man and demystifying the enigma of the human brain and spine. And in addition to that, I'm proud to say that he's my nephew, and we are really proud of him. So now more information on Mazda's incredible background and current endeavors can be found on his website, which is now in the chat. So with that, help me welcome Dr. Mazda Turel.
Thank you, Mani. It's such a pleasure to be here at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, my time. But hope all of you holding a drink in your hand and enjoying a Friday evening. That's how America usually tends to wind up the week, right? So I'm going to share my screen. And just let me know if you can see the slide.
Yeah.
Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Yes, we see the slide.
Okay, great. And is it moving?
Yes.
And you can hear me? Okay,
yes.
So we've sorted out all the technological issues that usually happen on Zoom calls. But I mean, it's a great pleasure to be here and to be in front of all of you. Thank you for taking the time off on a Friday evening to come and listen to neuroscience, which is not exactly a very entertaining topic, but let's see how we can make it a little lighthearted for everybody. So I spent 1 year of my life in Chicago, and looking at all of you on this call makes me feel like I'm already right there. This is the building that I studied and worked in. It's the Rush University Hospital in Midtown, and I used to love taking photos of the city from this hospital. This is the view of downtown Chicago from the window of my office, and it was such a beautiful and inspiring sight. This was at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's the time I usually used to ride to work. I used to stay on Michigan and Wacker, pretty much the heart of downtown. And it used to take me about 20 minutes to ride my bicycle to work. And this was on a bright, sunny morning. This is how beautiful the city looks with all its iconic buildings and all its green parks. And this is one of my favorite pictures of the city. And these are all taken by me from either from the operating room or from the OPD. So Mani suggested that we talk a little bit about neuroscience to everybody. And neuroscience, and I'm a neurosurgeon particularly. So I'm someone who operates on the human brain and the human spine. And trust me, there's nothing more fascinating than being able to open up someone's head every day and look at the beauty of the human brain. We in the field of neuroscience have understood more about the human brain in the last 5 years than we have in the last 50 years or 100 years. And it's literally a gold mine that we are sitting on. Actually, the gold mine is sitting on us. You can see that this human brain is just about a 3-pound mass of jelly that fits in the palm of your hand, and it can contemplate the vastness of interstellar space. It can contemplate itself contemplating. It can make us wonder, what are we doing here on a Friday evening when we could be partying somewhere else? But the beauty of these thoughts is because we have over 100 billion synapses or neurons that connect with one another and form synapses. And this integration of all these billion neurons forming over 1 trillion synapses results in what we call the entire spectrum of our human nature and human consciousness. This is what actually makes us who we are. This is what makes us human. Isn't it fascinating to know that there are about 100 billion neurons in your brain, and the brain that weighs only about 2 to 3% of your body weight? Even if you're pig-headed, it just weighs about 2 to 3% of your body weight. It uses a quarter of the energy of the entire body. So more electrical impulses are generated in one day by a single human brain than all the cell phones in the world. And just with that statistic, you can imagine how mind-boggling the potential of the human brain is. And some scientists say that we use only about 5 to 10% of it. And I'm sure we've all met people who use much less than that. But this guy is called the motor homunculus. This is actually the representation of our body parts in the human brain. Not all body parts have an equal amount of representation. Areas or parts of the brain that use the maximum dexterity, that require the maximum amount of fine tuning, especially the hands with which you do your finest work, and your mouth, your speech, your coordination of your language, your assimilation of your thoughts and being able to articulate them. That's how the brain represents itself. The torso and the thigh and the trunk and all of those parts don't have such an important representation in the brain. Women may have a larger speech area, but that's besides the point. This is this is how our body is represented on a cut section of the human brain, and it's extremely important to know which areas, especially when you're operating, which area is responsible for what function. No two brains are alike. No two brains are alike. Every brain is different, even though the imprint looks pretty much the same, but every gyral pattern, every sulcal pattern is very, very different. It's like no two fingerprints are alike. So the imprint of the brain is completely different for every human being. It's just like how the pupil of the iris of the eye is different for every human being. Every human being, while the earlobe looks pretty much the same, has a very different shape. No two people have the same shape. Similarly, the imprint of your tongue, those are all very, very different in different people, and likewise for the brain. I mean, it's very difficult to make a presentation sitting at home with two daughters running around without having photos of candies in them. So that's why this picture here. We talk about people who are left-handed, people who are left-brained and right-brained. This whole concept of the right brain being people, the right brain people being more intuitive, more emotional, more passionate, more creative, and the left brain people being more logical, more analytical, accurate. That, in some sense, is what the concept was once upon a time. But now we are moving to integration of hemispheres, where you may be slightly dominant, and if you look at this, you can try and write down in the chat box what you see, whether this shoe is pink and white or it's green and gray. Some people will say that it's pink and white and refuse to believe that it could be any other color. Those who are right brain look at it as pink and white. Those who are left brain look at it as green and gray. And if you tell someone that this is what you see, they will refuse to even believe it. So that's how sharp uh, the divide is. And if you look at it in a deeper sense, if you look at it more philosophically from your brain point of view, no one really sees what you see, even if they see it too. So that's just an interesting and deep thought. But the whole idea uh, of creativity, of a lot of people ask us, what do we do to not become senile? What do we do to not um, have dementia early on in life? Some things are within our control, some things are not in our control. Being Parsi, being senile is part of our characteristic, even at a very young age. But uh, creativity is this intersection between rational thinking and emotional intelligence, and the whole the whole idea is for one hemisphere of the brain to be able to talk to the other hemisphere. And if you start doing things uh, with your non-dominant hand that you usually do with your dominant hand, uh, listen to music that's you've not heard before, indulge in learning a language or playing a musical instrument, or indulging in art. Those are all things that actually boost creativity. It's very simple. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. But now we have data to show us that we are able to prove this objectively and scientifically. Involving yourself in sitting in a meditative practice does wonders for uh, increasing these synapses. And this whole thing of building your inner fortitude is called inner size, as opposed to just building external muscles with exercise. So I encourage all of you to really try these things out. We've studied the human brain in a very fascinating way over the years. This is what an MRI scan of the brain looks like. This is the main cortex, this is the brainstem, this is the cerebellum. And now with advances in neurosciences, we are able to actually study individual fibers of the brain, fibers that cross from one hemisphere to another, fibers that go from top to bottom, and fibers that connect each other. And supposing this is a brain tumor, this little blob, black blob there, you can actually study looking at details of fibers as to whether the fibers are infiltrated, whether fibers are just pushed. And that helps us to predict what the recovery is going to be. It helps us talk to patients, telling them what one should expect after an operation of this nature. We are now able to do something called as functional MRIs, where we can put a patient in an MRI machine and ask them to move their hand. And we ask them to move their hand, and the hand area of the brain lights up. So this is the hand area of the brain. This is the leg area of the brain. And once upon a time, we would just go using the shortest corridor to a tumor that's sitting right here, and we would be damaging hand and leg areas without really knowing where they are. Because what happens when tumors form in the brain, these areas get displaced. So now we have the ability to find trajectories to be able to minimize any kind of damage. Once upon a time, the mortality for brain surgery was 100%. 100 years ago, if you went into an operating room, there was a 100% chance that you wouldn't make it out alive. But now, with virtual reality and augmented reality, we can actually tiptoe into someone's brain. This red blob you can see is a tumor, and we can look at it from all angles. We can see fibers that we didn't see before, blood vessels that we didn't know existed. We can plan an operation like we couldn't plan it before, and all this to maximize safety and minimize any kind of morbidity. This myth of if you have brain surgery or if you have spine surgery, you're going to end up cocky or you're going to end up in bed is at the end of the day more or less just a myth. With these advances that we have, we are able to do a very fine job in today's day and age. You can see this is how surgery used to be performed 100 years ago. This is a doctor who was very famous for performing the fastest amputations in the world, and but he had such a high mortality rate. When he was performing one particular operation, not only did the patient die, but he slit his assistant's finger. The assistant died, and someone else watching the operation had a heart attack looking at the amount of blood loss, and he died. So this guy technically performed surgery with a 300% mortality. And today, mortality for surgery overall is less than 1%. We are now able to operate on patients awake. This is a gentleman in whom we are removing a brain tumor awake. Why? Because it's very close to the hand and leg area. So we are able to check hand and leg function while we are removing tumor. So if he becomes weak during the operation, we can stop excising that tumor, and that tumor can be then dealt with by radiation or chemo. But we can safely remove tumors like this. All this while he's actually watching his own operation on a screen in front of him. So that's the real advance that we've made in terms of neuroscience. Now, with minimally invasive surgery using the endoscope, we can enter the brain through the nose, through the eye, through the ear. Don't imagine any other orifice, because we'll get to that later. This is operating through the nose. This is a patient who had a tumor that was compressing the optic nerves, and you can see this white structure is the optic nerve, and we can safely remove these things from the nose in a straightforward and simple operation. And patients go home in a couple of days. It's pretty standard surgery now. But just because I'm saying it's standard, don't try it at home. It won't help. So the practice of neurosurgery is a very sustained and a very intense practice. And while it may seem lighthearted, there's a lot of preparation and a lot of mind work that goes into doing stuff. Uh, Patients who have strokes, we are now able to treat them endovascularly. We don't need to open up the head like we used to. We can remove blood clots just by putting in a catheter inside the brain, and patients make a remarkable recovery. We can coil aneurysms. We can treat other vascular malformations just by a single needle stick injury in the groin. This is how we actually open up the head if we need to perform an operation, and this is removing a blood clot from someone's brain. This is under the magnification and illumination of a microscope, which makes even 5 millimeter blood vessels look. This is like almost delivering a baby from someone's artery, and this blood vessel is not more than 5-6 millimeters in size. So this is the advancement of neurosurgery. We can actually get patients into the operating room. This guy had a problem playing a single note on his guitar. So we can get him into the operating room and using deep brain stimulation, stimulate that area of the brain that causes this dysfunction and help them get doing whatever they're doing. We are able to operate on children who have spinal cord defects who are in the uterus. This is a child in who is intrauterine, whose uterus has been opened while the pregnancy is going on. The spinal cord repair has been corrected, and the baby is put back into the uterus for pregnancy to continue till it reaches full term, and then you have a normal baby that's born. So that's the advancement. That's the future of neuroscience. We are able to now even separate Siamese twins that are conjoined at the head with reasonably good results. But it's not always that it's not always ecstasy. A lot of it is morbidity, sometimes mortality. This gentleman, I want to tell you a little story about him. He had a huge spinal cord tumor. You can see that this is a 10-centimeter tumor in the spinal cord. It looks like a sausage. It's occupying his entire spinal cord. There's no, the remaining spinal cord is just like a sliver of film. So, and he came to us walking, and we took him into the operating room. And usually we do these operations while performing something called as intraoperative neuromonitoring, where if we're dissecting in certain areas of the spine or the brain, if we create some damage, we are told by the neuromonitoring physician that, okay, listen, hold on, we've dropped signals, something may be happening, so we can stop. But when we took this patient inside from the start of the operation, we had flat lines, we had no signals at all. So we didn't know if we were to continue, whether we would damage him, because the tumor in the spinal cord, while trying to remove, you can cause a complete paralysis of the legs. So we had a very difficult decision to make, whether we should go ahead and operate on this or stop the operation or wait for him to deteriorate and then come back to us without any kind of signal feedback. So we went ahead and did the operation, and we removed a 10-centimeter tumor from the spinal cord. It looks like a sausage, but lo and behold, after surgery, this guy just didn't move his legs. So I was cursing myself and saying, this is a young 27-year-old guy, just married, going to start a family. You've caused him paraplegia. Paraplegia not only means inability to move his legs, but it results in bowel and bladder dysfunction, results in sexual dysfunction. It's an extremely traumatic situation, not only for himself, but for the family and for the surgeon. And while we say that most things will eventually be okay, sometimes even if you put up a good fight, you think that you're doing things with the best intentions, it really doesn't work out the way you always planned it to be. So we had to really struggle with him. This is him after a couple of weeks of being completely paraplegic, able to walk with a walker, just barely with the support of two people. You can see him still having his urine back, and we were consciously, we put him in an intense rehab program. And then a couple of months later of, trying everything, I was really not sure if he's going to make any kind of significant recovery. And uh, we lost touch for about 3 to 6 months. And 6 months later, he sends me a video of him running on his terrace. He climbed 20 stories, and he's running on his terrace, completely back to being normal, back to attaining all his functions that he had lost. And that's when you realize, okay, you were brave enough to take a decision that worked out well for you, but sometimes it doesn't always work out the way you intend it to work out. And the reason why I write is because every case teaches us something. Every patient is someone that we learn from, and deeply affects us in not only a physical way but also in a very emotional way. And and we are now studying more and more of how storytelling really impacts, how neuroscience has a role, how the way we talk to our children, how we tell them stories. Now, if we want to talk to them about religion and philosophy and all of those things, should we use standard techniques that we've been using them? Should we force them to go to the agyari, or should we use ways in which we can actually instill in our children or our youth uh, an interest that they follow their passion? Storytelling, really, we found now with evidence in neurosciences, results in releasing certain hormones which do certain things to the brain, which piques interest, which piques awe, wonder, inspiration, all of these things. So how do we use these tools to enhance cognition, to enhance the ability of people to be interested in? It's really, again, thinking about making the left brain talk to the right brain, and not being disconnected between the two. This is what really helps us remember and integrate stuff, rather than just what we learn by rote. And the reason why we are learning more and more, the reason why that guy who was completely paraplegic became better, is we're knowing more about neuroplasticity, we're knowing more about neurogenesis. Neuroplasticity is the ability of neurons to actually reform or rejoin once some damage has been done or some alteration has been made. And we once upon a time thought that we are born with a fixed number of neurons, but now we know that we can increase the number of these neurons, and increasing the number of these neurons, like I told you, increases synapses. And allowing more synapses allows for more integration and allows for more ability to do the things we want to do. And just simple things like you know less saturated fat, less stress, more exercise, eating, basically eating and sleeping correctly, and indulging in some amount of physical fitness. The one thing that's extremely important right from infancy to adulthood is to be able to keep moving. Little children, they love jumping around, and we commit a huge mistake by telling them, hey, don't jump, don't do this, don't do that. Actually, movement is what really enhances brain function right from childhood to adulthood. Even the elderly, a lot of elderly patients come to me with spine problems, and the only thing I tell them is, as far as possible, please keep moving, because that's the only thing that's going to really keep you agile. Bed rest is completely contraindicated even for patients who have spinal problems, and there are only very, very specific indications for bed rest. So there's no way to quantify the effect that uh, happens to children when children complete their homework, when they finish worksheets, when they finish assignments. We have an objective way to look at it and say, okay, this is the amount of academic excellence they've achieved. But when children play in the garden for 2 hours, or when children are cycling, or when they're swimming, there's an intense amount of brain function that gets enhanced. But we don't give too much of credit to it because there's no way of objectifying it. So please allow kids to play as much as is necessary. And that is why this combination of eating healthy, sleeping healthy, playing, less indulgence in screen time, etc., has to be given a lot of emphasis, because that is why brain fitness matters. We have tons and tons of data now to show us objectively that these things really work. So I encourage you, all of you, to please give yourself and give your brain the time and space that it needs to improve its function, so that, because all Parsis are going to live till 95 or 100, right? There are very few we know who don't make it to that age. So and we want to maintain a good quality of life while we do so. So with that, I thank you all. This is of the last time I was in Chicago at the Darbe Mer, and we had a beautiful time. I don't remember if this was Nowruz or New Year, but this was my family then. All the three girls have grown up significantly over the last 5 years, and it was a great pleasure to talk to you. I think I'm good for time. I'm happy to take any questions in case there are, um, and feel free to email me or WhatsApp me on this number, or write to me, or check out the website. We'll be happy to have a discussion if time permits, and if there are any questions.
Mazda, we did have a quick question. Thank you, by the way, first of all, for this wonderful talk. We did have a few questions come in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that we get to most of them.
Yes, you can take one thing at a time. Yeah.
Okay, one of them was, why do you go to the brain through blood vessels in the groin as opposed to closer to the head?
Oh yeah. So if you need to reach blood vessels, you need some form of an access. And the two ways to access it are either from the femoral artery in the groin or the radial artery in the arm. Doing it directly from a carotid puncture doesn't allow you to, you can do it directly from the carotid as well, but that's a much larger vessel, and that hole doesn't seal as effortlessly as holes in a smaller vessel seal. So that's why you go in either from the radial artery or from the groin, and then you need to put in sheaths and catheters and all of that to be able to either get out a clot or put in a coil. So just for the ease of that, you do it that way.
Thank you. Yeah.
Katie wants to know if hair loss is connected with brain function. If I could answer that question, I wouldn't be looking the way I look. I don't know if hair loss is connected to brain function. Hair loss is something to do with some form of genetic issue, and I guess the stress that everybody lives with in today's day and age. There's another question which says, can you talk about electronic implants and electrical neurostimulation of certain areas of the brain? So there's something called as deep brain stimulation, in which you put in electrodes inside the brain and stimulate the brain, and that is primarily for Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders. We also use it for obsessive compulsive disorders. We also use it for now we're using it for depression and anxiety and all sorts of other functions for people who have eating disorders, because they're all connected to the hypothalamus, which is the as they say, the soul of the brain or the seat of the brain, and all these nuclei are situated there. So by stimulating them and altering their function, you're able to, and the success rate is very good. The success rate, depending on what you're using it for, the success rate in Parkinson's is the greatest. They're trying it out in all other areas, and they're trying to figure out what the best frequency of stimulation would be for each particular disorder, and uh, that's about that. Roxanne wants to know if someone has neuropathy in the feet and hands, can they develop neuropathy in the brain? No. So neuropathy in the feet and hands is a different entity altogether. It's because of myelin that gets affected. Very rarely can you have cranial nerves of the brain, the nerves that supply, eye function and movement of the eyes and facial function. So those can also get affected, uh, especially if you have diabetes. And very rarely, there's something called as a third nerve palsy that happens in patients who have diabetes. So that's neuropathy of the brain, if you may want to call it that, where they suddenly develop a double vision. But usually that gets better. Suddenly, Bell's palsy, you might have heard of Bell's palsy, which is where patients have a sudden onset facial weakness. But that does not necessarily have to correlate with you having a neuropathy in your hands and feet. Neuropathy in the hands and feet is much more common, and it's either because of diabetes mostly, or it could be because of other metabolic issues. There's another question by Bomi and Bachi, and they say, can ALS be treated by medicine or surgery? ALS, unfortunately, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or motor neuron disease, as some may call it, that's what Stephen Hawking had. Unfortunately, there isn't a cure yet. It's a condition which causes progressive degeneration of the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord, which results in weakness of the hands and legs, and sometimes even lower cranial nerve weakness, which is why people find it difficult to speak, talk, swallow, and they may require a Ryle's tube, etc. The only real current treatment is a medication called Rilutor, but that just has modest side effects. There's another medication called Aravon. That's an injection that's given for ALS every 2 weeks for a period of 2 weeks, and that delays the progression of the disease, but there isn't a cure yet. Zareen is asking, do you think consciousness is seated in the brain? That's a tricky question. It's a very philosophical question, but yes, I mean, if you want to call it the brain or the mind, that is the seat of consciousness. That is from where thoughts arise. That is from where you gain insight. That is what allows you uh, the ability to empty yourself of uh, everything that weighs you down. So uh, I would think that consciousness is seated in the brain, as opposed, I don't know if you're asking as opposed to the heart. The heart is more of a physical structure whose function is just to pump blood. And there's this constant debate between the heart and the brain. But even the, I guess, the soul of the heart is still the brain. Kersi wants to know, listen, I'm not a philosophical guy. I don't understand, I don't have a spiritual knowledge to be able to answer these deep questions. I'm a structural fellow. I deal with physical problems of the brain and spine. But I mean, this is a very interesting question, and I guess the pandemic has allowed everybody, has given everybody the time to think about these things and follow this path. Is it possible to train one's self to use both sides of the brain? Yes, it is. Of course, it is. And like I told you, you have to make a conscious effort to do it. You have to try and brush with your non-dominant hand. You have to try and use your doorknob with your non-dominant hand. Try and do things that you do with your dominant hand with your non-dominant hand. Solve sudokus. Listen to music that you've not been listening to before. Read stuff that you haven't read before. all of those things. Zareen wants to know, and is the brain the only place where memory is stored? It is said the heart and the stomach also store memory. So it depends on what kind of memory you're referring to. Um, yes, there are certain cells in the gut that have a certain kind of memory that does affect what you think. I'm not sure about the heart, but the main place where memory is stored and retrieved is the brain. It's in the area of the brain called the hippocampus or the amygdala, and there's an actual circuit. It's the entire limbic system forms that circuit, and that's responsible for memory. And we can actually, in certain operations, if we damage that circuit, we can completely destroy memory. And so sometimes we operate on patients awake if they have tumors in this area, just testing their memory. So while brain is the only place, it may be inappropriate to say that brain is the only place where memory is stored. The gut, not the stomach, but the entire gut has certain cells that affect memory. There's another question by Dolly Dastur. She's asking, how does stem cell implants help correcting brain diseases? So again, the study and the science of stem cells is still in its nascent stage. And what they do is, stem cells are cells that can regenerate to becoming cells of any particular organ system that you want them to. So if they're put in a correct environment and a milieu where they're able to grow into brain cells, the damaged brain cells, uh, they're able to take over the function of the damaged brain cells. And similarly, in the spinal cord, in patients who are paralyzed, if you are able to re-establish those connections with the damaged spinal cord, that's how stem cells help. Uh, there there are a lot of difficulties in injecting these stem cells and actually making them function, but that is what neuroscience has evolved to try and master. When I was at Rush in Chicago, we were actually doing a trial of stem cell transplants, and in 2 patients I have assisted my professor in injecting stem cells into the spinal cord, and they have seen some amount of improvement in their ability to walk. Roxana wants to know, if someone has a pituitary adenoma, will it manifest into a bigger tumor with time? Yes. So pituitary adenomas, about 30% of them don't increase in size. It really depends on if it's incidentally found. If you've just done a brain scan for something else and you found a tumor in the pituitary gland with no other dysfunction, usually when they grow, they press on the optic nerves. So when they press on the optic nerves, you'll know that there is a visual problem, but about 60% of them do grow. So depending on the size, if it's less than 1 centimeter, it's unlikely to grow. If it's more than 1 centimeter, it's going to grow. The best thing to do is to monitor it in 2 ways. One is by checking visual function every 3 to 6 months, and secondly is by repeating an MRI at least once a year to check if there is any growth. Zinu and Firoza Master want to know, where exactly are the pineal gland and the pituitary gland situated? Um, I'm doing this from home. Otherwise, in my office, I had a skull with me. But the pituitary gland is situated right in the center of the brain. So if you take your eyes backwards and maybe 5 centimeters behind in the center, if you draw a line 5 centimeters between your eyebrows right into the center of the brain, that's the pituitary gland. And that's the gland that secretes all the hormones, the growth hormone, the thyroid hormone, cortisol. All of that is where the pituitary gland is. 2 centimeters behind the pituitary gland, or maybe 3 centimeters behind the pituitary gland, more or less the same trajectory, uh, is the pineal gland. And they're more or less in the same horizontal plane, uh, but they're about 3 centimeters apart. that's where people say one of the chakras of the head is also located. So everybody, the spiritual world focuses their medications on decalcifying the pineal gland or opening up the pineal gland to be able to receive um, insight from above. Uh, Afshan, thank you very much for your kind words. Zareen has another question. Will there ever be a successful brain transplant? If that happens, would one happen? If that happens, what would happen to one's identity, one's consciousness, and one's self-awareness? How could someone else's brain in your body help you control your limbs and other organs? Again, deeply philosophical. Actually, if you look at it, I had another presentation where we've spoken about this. And give me a second to show it to you. But a brain transplant at some point will be possible. They are thinking about it. They're talking about it. An Italian neurosurgeon was trying to figure it out. He had spent about $20 million doing the experiment. And this was. Am I able to share my screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was the guy in whom they were actually planning to do the first brain transplant, because he had a muscular disease, which all the muscles of his body were completely dysfunctional, but his mind was okay. So they were planning to transplant his head onto a functional guy who was brain dead. But it hasn't still worked out. What's going to happen to one's identity, consciousness, and all of those things is a matter of debate. You've heard stories of people who've had a heart transplant and how deeply connected they've been to family members of those who've donated the heart. So, but in India, we've had our first brain transplant centuries before anybody else, where they did it for Ganpati. So our Vedic knowledge and our ancient studies are way ahead of the curve. Let's try and get to some other questions. Will these neurosurgeries cure Alzheimer's? No, unfortunately not. Alzheimer's is again a degenerative problem in the brain, and the answer to solving the problems of Alzheimer's don't lie in surgery. They lie in finding the genetic basis of it and altering genes, or finding the molecular basis of it and altering those substrates that result in the formation of plaques in the brain that are responsible for Alzheimer's. But never say never. I mean, neurosurgery may eventually boil down to be able to be injecting certain materials in the brain that may be able to alter brain function. Khurshid wants to know. Khurshid's actually the name of my daughter and the name of my mother. So I'm happy to have questions from Khurshid. Khurshid wants to know, was that the picture of the operation on the fetus? Yes. So it was a spina bifida surgery, a meningomyelocele, what they say, where there's a defect in the spinal cord and it's open. And so that child was removed, the defect was sealed, and the baby was put back into the uterus and they're doing it regularly. They've done it in over 1,000 children worldwide with very good results. Zareen's again asking me philosophical questions. Zareen, listen, we need to take this offline. I'm not a philosophical guy. I'm a simple fellow. These are difficult questions. How how exactly, see, I'm a neurosurgeon, I'm not a neuroscientist. A neuroscientist is someone who will be able to tell you how exactly a memory is stored in the brain. Yes, it's a combination of visual processing. It's a combination of sound processing, and when you see something or you hear something or you read something, it gets coded and embedded in certain parts of the brain, and then repeatedly doing it reinforces that coding. That is why several times you forget certain things. Uh, Sometimes the coding is so strong that uh, you've just seen it once somewhere, and you'll never forget it. Uh, Sometimes you read an email from somebody on your phone, and you can say exactly that 10 years ago I was doing this at this particular point in time, and that's when I read this email. So it's a very complicated circuit, and there's no one word answer of how they're stored. It's a combination of visual, auditory synapses that integrate with one another, along with chemicals that are secreted, and the emotion that that you're facing when you are dealing with that memory. Natalie, hi. It said that we use only 10% of our brain. How can I boost my brain to using 110%? I mean, like I told you, uh, there's a there's a book by Sanjay Gupta recently. He's a neurosurgeon. He's also one of these guys who keeps showing up on TV, and he's written a book on 5 ways to boost your brain. I mean, it's got to do with just correct diet, the right amount of exercise, correct amount of sleep, and being cognitively uh, fine-tuned to using more parts of your brain, in indulging in activities that constantly challenge your thinking, memory, insight, etc. Zareen, no need to ask for any forgiveness. I'm really happy to answer all these questions. Zenobia says, is there a greater incidence of neuromuscular congenital disease in the Parsi community than it is in the general population? Uh, Not to my knowledge. I mean, there's a greater incidence of age-related degenerative problems. Parkinson's is for sure higher, and that's been studied by neurologists in Bombay. Alzheimer's and certain forms of dementia are higher, whether we like to accept it or not. Uh, I'm not sure that the incidence of congenital neuromuscular conditions is higher. Jaru Auntie is also here. Thank you, Jaru Auntie, for coming. Hope Hosi Uncle is doing well. Mr. Rivetna is here. Why do people with Alzheimer's remember their early days but not remember what happened yesterday? Beautiful question. So Alzheimer's affects short-term memory. There are certain other forms of dementia that affect long-term memory. So people with Alzheimer's will remember when they got married or what their wives said to them 50 years ago, which is not a good thing. But they will forget what they had for breakfast. So the circuitries for short-term memory and long-term memory, and how short-term memories get converted to long-term memories, are different. The synapses are different. So in Alzheimer's, what happens is that the short-term memory pathways get afflicted more by the plaques that form, and the long-term memories are spared. In other forms of dementia, long-term memories get affected. So that's the reason why in Alzheimer's, that's the problem. But as Alzheimer's progresses, it begins to affect short-term and long-term memory, and then it gets to a really bad stage. I'm smiling because there's another question by Zareen. Could there be a collective consciousness outside the body? Listen, I think I'm going to get my wife to answer all these questions, because she's more fine-tuned with these things. But yes, there is something called as the collective consciousness. They claim the brain is the only receptor, not the storage. No, there is a collective consciousness of individuals. There is a collective consciousness of the planet. There is a collective consciousness of your immediate environment. There's a collective consciousness of the entire planet. And that is why probably we are going through what we are going through. That is why certain countries, why India has not been as badly affected as America. Some people claim it's because of the collective consciousness of the country is vibrating at a slightly higher level than America or other parts of the West. So none of these things can be negated. None of these things can, now we are learning more and more about these things. We're able to prove these things scientifically. So there is a collective consciousness outside the body, but it's the collective consciousness of everybody manifesting that consciousness. In Alzheimer's, is short-term memory not stored, erased, or just hidden from being retrieved? It's a difficult question to answer. If I would, I think they're stored, but they either may be erased very quickly or they may. So if you, while someone's eating breakfast, if you ask them what they're eating, that's also short-term memory. So it is stored in some form. It's just difficult to retrieve once it gets stored. Mr. Revetna wants to know, is our very sight, sound, etc. from birth throughout our lives logged somewhere in our brain? Yes, every experience that we have registers in some form, depending on what the environment is at that time, depending on what the emotion associated with it is at that time. But how it gets retrieved is, I mean, if you were to be able to retrieve every single thing that was registered, I think you need to be superhuman for that. But and I'm sure there must be people who might be doing this, but a lot of it gets filtered, and that is why we remember what we remember and we don't what we don't. Hi Murli, thanks for your comment. Manik is asking, you said sleep more, or should older people sleep more? See, there's no, I mean, this thing of sleep now is again a very individual thing. Some people say 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what is recommended, and that's what most of neuroscience professes too. But if you are functioning at your peak with 6 hours of sleep, for you as an individual, that amount of sleep is okay. If you're not functioning, if you wake up in the morning and still feel groggy, then probably you need, so you have to adjust to your body. But 7-8 hours of sleep is what most people recommend. Some people function beautifully and effectively with 5 hours of sleep. And for some people, the requirement of sleep may vary from day to day, depending on what they've expanded their energies for. Do we have to wind up, or should I keep answering?
No, if you like to answer, please go ahead.
I'm happy. I'm hoping everybody's got a whiskey out. Some people are having dinner. I'm having chai. So it's good. We can keep going. I have 49 questions left to go. Okay, good. Meher says, does light therapy or stimulating the pineal gland help overcome SAD? I'm not sure what SAD is. If you can help me with the full form, just speak it out if you're listening. Oh, it's a direct message. It doesn't show up on the chat. But if you can tell me what SAD is, then
you can unmute yourself, whoever it is. Who is that? But
yes, light therapy, there's a certain kind of light. It's called the fuchsia light or something. That if thrown at a certain frequency, is able to stimulate the pineal gland, and decalcifying the gland or stimulating the pineal gland does have its benefits. Bhaktawar has an interesting question. Does the brain have anything to do with humans evolving to a state of perfect righteousness, where with every generation people become more and more righteous? That is, if every generation makes the effort to practice righteousness, can we change genetically? Yes, of course. So this is the field of epigenetics that you are discussing. While we have a certain DNA code that is embedded in our genes, we also have the ability with certain practices to be able to modify that code. It's not the where all and end all of everything. We are able to modify that code, and that is how we are learning to study cancer, how the cancer genome is actually embedded in almost all of us. How are we able to study that code and find ways to alter it? So I'm sure the same thing could be done with every generation as far as righteousness is concerned. And I know that's got more to do with nurture than nature, but eventually all these things can be fine-tuned internally.
So now, Vasda, we will take 2 more questions, and
You want to
then
wind?
yeah, please take 2 more questions, and then we will.
Okay.
Um,
Let's take a few more questions. I'm going to skip all the comments by lots of my friends in North America, and thank you everybody for taking the time out. Let's see if there are any. Does a person with Alzheimer's know in the initial stages? The person with Alzheimer's is carefree. They don't know anything. They're just enjoying life. It's everybody around them who get hassled. It's like children. Is there scientific truth to certain diets? Yes, there is scientific truth to certain diets. There is scientific evidence that reducing omega-3 fatty acids, etc., enhances brain function. There is evidence that berries are good for brain and all of those things. I'm going to go through them quickly. I'm going to skip all the questions on Alzheimer's because, to be honest, I really don't know too much about. That's a neurology based topic. I'm a neurosurgeon, so if you have, I've already said stuff about how to keep a healthy brain. Seasonal affective disorder, SAD, seasonal affective disorder for the pineal gland. Yes, I'm guessing the winters are depressing in Chicago. You can try that and see if it works for the pineal gland. It may help. Let's run through this quickly. What is the mechanism behind exercising? So yes, exercise also has a very scientific proof to enhancing brain function. There's increasing brain derived neurotropic factor which comes through exercise, both aerobic and anaerobic exercise. So that's how, and oxygenation of the brain improves with exercise, and that's the reason you get exercise is really beneficial for your brain. Okay, most of these messages are thank you. I'm not allowed by the chairperson of this meeting to answer any more questions, but feel free to email me on mazdaturel.com or message me on 993-017-4567.
Would you like us to put your number in chat section?
Sure. You want me to do it? Or
Yeah,
you
please go.
So it'll be +91 because it's India, then 993-017-4567. That's my number, and my email is mazdaturel@gmail.com. And if anybody wants to take a look at the website, a lot of these questions are, except for Zareen's questions, which I don't think anybody has answers to. they're there on the website if you want to look at questions regarding structural problems of the brain and spine. But thank you very much for taking the time out, and it must be what, 8:30 p.m. there, maybe 9 o'clock.
Yeah, it's almost 8, getting close to 8:40. But I really wanted to thank you, Mazda, for your great presentation. Somebody had put it in chat that the presentation with no big jargons, and I think I really agree with whoever is that. And really, it was broken it down to set our level, layman level. And if Erv Dr is there, I would like to invite him just to say he's our global chairperson for WZC. Is Adel, are you there?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah, Mazda, thank you very, very much for absolutely fascinating talk. We all enjoyed it thoroughly, and the questions were very illuminating, and we have to follow your advice and stay up to speed in the future. Thank you also, Mani and the Chicago group, for putting it together. Really appreciate the effort. And thank you all the people listening and the audience for supporting WZCC, and especially this new initiative we've taken of ZEDF. Thank you, everyone, again, very much.
Thank you. And we thank again Arzan Vadia, president of Fazana. He has been with us throughout. He turned on the link and he has been with us. And I really appreciate his support. He's been always helpful. And I thank you once again, Mazda, very much. We really enjoyed your presentation. We'll have you again if you like to come, because people have so many questions. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I think just wanted to make sure.
Next time we'll talk about the spine.
I'm sorry?
Next time we'll talk about the spine. This time we focused on the brain.
Sure. We'll definitely do that. Definitely, yeah.
That itself is another wonderful how to take care of your back is especially very, very important for the elderly. And if you want, we can do, I'm serious, we can do a talk about the spine for half an hour, and it'll give you some great insight that you've probably neglected over the years.
That would be wonderful.
Sure.
If it's okay, could I just mention that the Gahambar was very much encouraged by Mr. Darius Jamshidian, was very encouraging about it and wanted it to go forward, as well as this fabulous, fabulous presentation. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you all once again. And we'll see you when Mazda wants to come back again, maybe.
We'd love that.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Great. As they say in America, have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, and you have a great Saturday now, because we woke you up very early.
No, I get up at 5 o'clock every morning.
Wow.
Oh, okay. You're so young and you get up so early, huh?
That's what keeps your brain ticking, I guess, huh?
That was wonderful. Outstanding.
Do you come from a family of neurosurgeons?
Yes, my father's also a neurosurgeon.
Dr. Turel.
And
yeah, Dr. Turel, you remember we had him once?
In Perth.
Right.
He was awarded in Perth also.
Right.
His son is right?
His father.
Okay.
Mazda?
Yes.
Mazda, this is Darius Jamshidian, and that was outstanding.
Thank you so much. Thank you
I
for
enjoy every sentence. And I wonder how much insurance you have on your hand, I'm a businessman.
Do you have on your hands?
Your hands. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Darius has been a chairperson of WZCC of New York. And thanks for coming, Darius.
Hope to see you all soon sometime when we visit North America again.
Yes.
Mazda,
You-
mark your calendar for July 1st through 4th, the World Zoroastrian Congress 2022, okay? And see you here.
2022 sounds like it could happen.
Wonderful. July 1st through 4th. Make it a fun holiday for you and your family. Yes, the three girls, your three girls.
Yes. You will.
I पल्ले joy नहीं है. Just soak it. Oops.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Everyone.
What are you having, Khurshid?
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.